Hello, everyone. My name is Deb Maitland, and I am here with Christa Couture. Christa, hi and welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself to us as well as your arts practice?
Yeah, I am a writer, musician, broadcaster, filmmaker based in Toronto. I am mixed Cree and settler Scandinavian. I am also disabled, queer, and a mom. And that's the basics.
So tell me, what pushed you to become an artist, or what was your journey like?
With singing, or with creating music anyways, when I was I guess 2 or 3 years old, we had my traditional naming ceremony. And, in our Cree communities and in Indigenous communities, our traditional name speaks to, your gifts or your role in the community. And so after I was given the name Saini Bay, which is it's an Arapaho word. I'm not Arapaho, I'm Cree, but the elder was Arapaho. So he named me Saini Bay, and it means singing woman. And after the ceremony, when he gave me my name, he told my family she's going to sing a lot and she's going to talk a lot. And I grew up with that story. I grew up being told, oh, Raymond said you're going to sing a lot and talk a lot. And that's what I do in my art, in my writing, in radio, through music. I'm always sharing my own stories and working to get my own stories kind of out to connect with people. So in some ways, like, it's always been there. It didn't start, it just always has been. um but that said, it was my early 20s where music in particular became like a focus as a career, and I started to take steps to make it part of my career and be quite dedicated to that. And then I published a memoir, my first big book, in 2020. And music has kind of taken a bit of a back burner. Writing has been more in the foreground. Also, filmmaking has kind of been more in the foreground. But they all, even though different things sort of shift into focus, they all kind of come down to some version of storytelling. So yeah, the question was, when did it start? It's just always been there.
Yeah, that's great. So I understand that it's part of your life and you've been doing this for the entire thing from the time that you were 2 years old. And I'm wondering how do you balance that? Was there any point in time where it was just too much for you to handle, or you didn't think that you would be, singing or talking a lot? Um, and how did, your career progress through those challenges?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been times where I felt disheartened as far as just making a living. I mean, making a living as an artist is a really difficult thing to do. And so much of our kind of identity gets wrapped into it because it's who we are. We are artists, we create, but at the same time we have to pay bills. And if you're not making enough money, that can feel like you're not good enough at making your art, and that's not the case. Like, it's and so there's certainly been times that was a struggle, or I had, a bit of a crisis of faith about it. um and so over time there's been other I've day jobs or not, or other things that I've done to make music possible. But it came to, I guess it was in 2016, I had a thyroidectomy surgery, and there was some complications, and it actually for a while injured my voice, and I stopped singing. I had to stop singing. And my voice recovered, and I'm able to sing again. But when that left, I did have this, like, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years. What do I do now? Which led to the book in a big way. It was like, well, what's another way that I can express myself? What's another way that I can feel creative? And I enjoyed the process of writing the book so much. I enjoyed staying in one place. A big part of being a working musician is touring, and you travel so much, which has its ups and downs. But it was nice being home. Um, and in some ways, the opportunity to write the book kind of addressed some of the challenges. I was starting to feel burnt out from touring. Touring is, again, it's hard, for a lot of people at a certain level, it's hard to financially make that work. And when I had this injury and had to kind of sit back, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try these other things. And it really helped with not getting burnt out. It helped with being able to, like, you know, uh, the relationships with my family and friends and not being on the road all the time. Um, and it made me think differently about ways to make money. And so I shifted more to writing. But I think, those challenges come and go. I think artists are always going to be facing those questions of money, identity, energy. And so I don't know what the next challenge will be, but right now it feels like I'm doing okay.
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your book and maybe what it's about and is who it's geared towards?
Sure. So my book is called How to Lose Everything, and it's a memoir. And I often introduce the book by sharing my what I call my grief bio, which is cancer, amputation, death, divorce, more cancer, which is like in bullet points, kind of the most significant losses that I've experienced. I had bone cancer as a kid, and my left leg was amputated above the knee as the cure for that cancer. I was very lucky that there was a cure, but of course, it was a huge loss and change. And my first son died when he was a day old. My second son died when he was 14 months old, and then my marriage ended. And so I write about all of these losses in the book, and up to kind of almost present day, almost up to 2020, when I moved to Toronto from Vancouver and was just kind of trying to start over after all of this loss and change, and had my daughter. And it just was a good moment to look back at all of these losses and see how I'd gotten through them. And the book is for, like, the intention is twofold. On one hand, it's for people who are going through, a loss or in that terrain of grief, which, we all will be or have been. Certainly during the pandemic, there's so much grief and loss of potential. And it's in a way to, it's an offering to connect with people so that the reader feels less alone and I feel less alone. And maybe for a minute we can just feel less alone. And it was also, and if it's not for someone potentially who's like needing that connection, it was a way to just invite people to have some insight into what some of those experiences are like. I think sometimes people hear about, my leg and they're like, oh, you only have one leg, what's that like? Or they hear about the loss of my two children and they say, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. And so this was a way for me to kind of answer those questions and share my story and say, "Look, this is what it was like for me." And the more we hear each other's stories and hear and learn about each other's stories, the better, right? So it was for those kind of two reasons. Like, if you're curious about me, here's what it's like. Or if you're going through a hard time, here's hopefully some friendship.
So tell me, does your music have sort of the same story, or was it written at a different part of your life where you had something different to say?
Most of my music, or a lot of my music up to a certain point, shared a lot of the same stories. Having had cancer, um, the deaths of my two sons. I have my divorce album, which is called Long Time Leaving. And so those stories are in the music as well. It's such a different kind of storytelling, right? I mean, in a song, it's what, 3 or 4 minutes, everything rhymes, there's a chorus. Whereas the book is sort of much more in depth. And also in lyrics, you can kind of hide. You can be, is it about me? Is it true? I don't know. It could be about someone else. Like, you get to sort of play with that. I mean, all of my songwriting is very autobiographical, but there's some creative license in music. And so in memoir, it was very much like, this is the whole story. But I had been sharing those stories kind of through music in my own way over the years. My most recent recording, Safe Harbor, which came out in 2020, was not about loss, probably the first time of all my albums. And it was more about being in this position now of, where things are relatively okay and where I can look back on those experiences, and more about a sense of safety. I mean, it came out in March 2020 when all of us were losing that sense of safety all around us. But the songs on that were less about loss and more about, yeah, calm.
So what about, I just want to shift gears a little bit to your filmmaking. Do you have anything coming up or anything that you're working on?
Yes. So filmmaking, I did actually go to film school after high school and worked in television production for like 8 years. But as music became more important and more in the foreground, I stopped working in production. And then in the last couple of years, it's come back into my creative zone. So I'm working on a project that I'm so excited about. It's a series of short animated films, and the series is called How to Lose Everything. It's the same title as my book. And the first short film is an excerpt from the book. And then the other four are each written by four different Indigenous artists, Indigenous writers, animated by four different Indigenous animators, and each tell a different story of loss, a different personal experience with loss. And so the theme, they're united by grief or loss, but visually they're all very different because each animator has their own style. The voice of each piece is the writer who did it. And there'll be English language versions, but also Indigenous language versions. So two of the films are by Cree writers. So we'll have two of the films in Cree, one in Tanaka, one in Anishinaabe-Moan, one in Inuktitut. So I'm so excited. It's in production now and will eventually be on CBC Gem. It's being produced for CBC Arts. And it's been so cool to be working in film again and to be creating something that involves so many artists. As a singer-songwriter and even writing my memoir, like that's just me. It's just me by myself making things. But this film series is a lot of collaboration and a lot of just supporting these other incredible artists. And yeah, 10 out of 11 of our key creative are Indigenous. And that feels really exciting too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited to learn more. So where can we find out more and when can we expect that?
The films I think will be out next year, so 2023. Animation is a very long, slow process. But the best way to keep in touch and keep up to date on all of these projects is like ChristaCouture.com or on Instagram at Christa Couture.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we should be looking forward to from you?
That's it. That's all the things. I think the films are the next big project to come out. I did release a new song in November called To Us. It's a song that I wrote as a toast to resilience, as a toast to the new year. So if people want to check that out, that's kind of a new offering. And then the films will be coming down the pipes.
Awesome. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to chat with you. I think I'd miss the opportunity if I don't just mention your many awards. And it's such an honor to really have you with us and to spotlight you in this way. Do you have like any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Last thoughts. I mean, I love this series. I'm so grateful to be spotlighted. If the audience hasn't seen or heard the other Indigenous artists that have been featured, my last words are to go check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Krista. And we wish you the very best moving forward. And we're looking forward to your films and your music and reading your book and hearing all of your beautiful and sometimes, painful, heartbreaking stories that are gonna uplift us in very unique and interesting ways. So thank you so much.
Thank you.